Guten Abend.
Hello.
Okay, I'm here with TLO. I'm going to do one of my grilled interviews with him. Most people will know you a lot about your StarCraft 2 career because you've been a very popular player and a very high-profile player. But when I was reading up, I saw that most people know about the Supreme Commander period of your career, but not very many people know that actually there was a period where you tried to get good at Brood War. And I saw it listed on a site somewhere that you'd got to B plus, A minus level on iccup, which actually, in terms of context for people, that's actually pretty high. I think as soon as you get to about A minus, you actually start to play I think Korean B teamers and stuff. Can you give us an idea of how long did you really spend trying to get good at it, and how good actually did you get?
First of all, to be fair, the A minus I got there, but I was only there 3 hours.
Okay.
But I still, I still like to point out I was A minus to the point. But I dropped from A minus to C plus in the most insane loss streak in a row. But that aside, basically, I played a lot of Brood War when I was between 12 to 15, and then obviously I wasn't very good at all, and I was decent for my age maybe, but still. And then I was very interested in esport, and I watched a ton of Brood War throughout my life basically. And when StarCraft 2 was announced, I was playing Supreme Commander and all that, but I realized StarCraft 2 is gonna be huge. My brother and I, we were discussing, and we thought StarCraft 2 is gonna be when esport starts becoming really big. And fortunately, it was kind of true, even though obviously esport existed before, but I feel like StarCraft 2 was a pretty nice catalyst.
Katowice, yeah.
And so I started practicing Brood War for 1 year, having in mind that I'm going to play StarCraft 2.
Ah, that's interesting that you actually did it specifically so that you could then move on to Brood War, StarCraft 2. Because even though a lot of people like to proclaim over and over, oh, well, how good you were at Brood War, it doesn't matter in StarCraft 2. One of the interesting things about Brood War is because it's so difficult and so many good Koreans were playing it, it meant that to get good at it would obviously be a lesson in getting good at anything, you know. Can you talk about this aspect? Because to get high in Brood War was actually very, very difficult.
Yeah, actually, it's a little bit funny that I feel like we forgot a lot of things we did in StarCraft 1 that we don't do as much in StarCraft 2 anymore. Which is a little bit...
what type of things do you think of when you say that?
Well, I think just the way the BattleNet was designed was much more aimed, or it made it much easier for programmers to practice more consciously, in the sense that we didn't just mindlessly ladder ever. Because even when you played iccup, you had to find opponents manually. Yeah. Which led to people playing much more custom games in general. I mean, even every single ladder game was kind of like a custom game where you would just ask the same person you just lost to play more games with you. Mm-hmm. And it often ended up you playing a best of 3 or best of 5 against the same guy in a row. And you could always try to seek out specific races too. You could just message people in the chat channel and be like, I'm a B- player looking for a Protoss player on this map, and then people would message you. So that helped people become better much more than our ladder. The ladder kind of style of training is very toxic to becoming better in a way.
When you say that, so first of all, those two things, the ladder style and the toxic aspect. When you say the ladder, are you just thinking of Western Grandmaster and stuff like that? Is it also the case for Korea? Because I know some people complain if you're a foreigner and you have no idea who the barcodes are, it's actually hard to know how much you're improving or who you played before, etc. So what do you mean by toxic, and what ladder specifically are we talking about here?
Well, first of all, by toxic I mean it's too easy to just only use ladder, because it's so comfortable to just keep pressing that button. Yeah. And playing for hours and hours without interacting with anybody doing that. And yeah, so that makes you not seek out training partners as much, because you don't necessarily need to, even though you should. And also I think it's a little bit better in Korea, definitely, because the skill level is just higher. So if in Europe, there's maybe, if you're a top pro gamer in Europe, there's 30 or 40 people who put up a real challenge. So the player pool is kind of small. You're gonna keep playing against the same people over and over again. So you're not gonna make new experiences when it comes to different styles. But in Korea, you just have so many people who are very good that it helps much more.
So this is actually a topic I wanted to get into. So let's jump into it now, which is the idea of hours of practice, but also the quality of practice. Because the big issue is there are a lot of players who sometimes, even when you say that, like, oh, it's not just the number of hours, the quality, they're then thinking that just means the quality of opponent. And so I'm going to give two famous examples here, which would be the Russian player Happy and the Ukrainian player Kaz. I don't know if it's possible to play more ladder StarCraft than these two people have, and yet if you look at their actual tournament results, they've never equated to like really high placings. They've never won big tournaments. So it's obviously the case that you can be even playing the top players in the ladder, but if you just do it in a certain way, it might not yield results. I saw a quote from you in 2011 where you said something along the lines of, like, someone could play 8 hours a day, but will he train 8 hours a day? Like, what can you say to this topic?
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting to think about what makes you become better. And I think just looking at Kaz and Happy, they are the classic example of people who would become much better playing 1 or 2 hours less a day and investing 1 or 2 hours more into their physical and mental fitness. That because if you just like basically you're gonna have diminishing gains the more you practice. The first 2 hours are probably the most effective a day, and then it just slowly declines. And once you're like above 8 hours, it's just, you're still gonna gain a little bit, but actually maybe you don't even gain anything. It could be at a point where you're so exhausted by the day that you're just gonna reinforce bad habits again. Because StarCraft 2 is a lot about discipline, and if you're like extremely tired, you're gonna start making mistakes you already stopped doing in your clean play, which might make your play less clean again because you're just training those things that you got rid of again. And yeah, it's a lot about focus. And I think the real goal of a StarCraft 2 player is to try to maximize the hours of StarCraft 2 he can play a day while being completely focused. So maybe it's possible to play 9 hours a day, but then you have to invest a ton of time into other things in your life as well.
When I did an interview with Snoot after he'd won HomeStory Cup, so like the pinnacle of his career, the first one he won, he told me this story about how when he'd been improving over 2012, there was a period where he set himself a task, like every day, no matter what, he would play 50 games of StarCraft. And from the way he described it, it sounded like by forcing himself to do the 50, like his mental processes would like deteriorate towards the end of the day. And it sounded like actually it was more mentally taxing than any kind of like boredom or physical aspect. I saw early in your career, at the very beginning, you were saying you were only playing like 2 to 4 hours a day, that when you didn't have time off. Obviously you've been to Korea a few times. What's the sweet spot for you? Like what have you found from your different experiments?
I feel like the best I perform when I train around 6 to 7 hours a day. Like, but then it really has to be focused. I mean, it depends. Like, what I try to do sometimes in some days is to play 10 or 11 hours, but that's not to practice StarCraft 2. That's just to practice staying focused longer, because sometimes tournaments have a very brutal schedule. Yeah. And if you never ever do that at home, you're gonna get crushed at a tournament because you're not mentally prepared for that. So in those sessions, for example, I learned that if I already have played 8 hours, I should try to not play as fancy, difficult styles, but the last 2 hours I tried to play very mechanically easy styles, even a little bit more all-ins. But if I want to have my optimal practice, it's between 6 to 7, maybe 6 to 8 hours, but that's like the limit, I think, at the moment.
Because it feels like there's an aspect that I've seen when I looked over the broad scope of your career. Okay, so you had these different periods where you would like go to Korea, then eventually come back again. You did this a few times, and then simultaneously you had these cycles also where you had like your CTU problems, like carpal tunnel syndrome problems rather, and so you'd have to take some time off, and then you'd be practicing really hard again. And it seemed like the combination between these two is when you start this heavy practice, you want to improve. Okay, so you're going like, I'm going to put as many hours as I can on anything, but then as soon as like it sounded like not just a physical aspect, but like an emotional aspect as well. Like when you're doing badly or something, then you want to take time away and step back from it. So it sounds like one of the issues here is like trying to go like all or nothing approach. Yeah. Like how is the balance now between the approaches? I
think it has become much better. I'm still somebody who goes through cycles, but I think almost everybody goes through cycles in some extent in competition. But I feel like I've become a much more stable person, especially over the past half year to the year. I haven't had like any moment where I like completely plummet in skill again and get like really depressed and frustrated. And even though, yeah, you're saying it's connected emotionally and physically, but I think a big part of that is that I haven't had any issues with my hands anymore in like a year. And that's also because I'm in a like mentally in a better spot. First of all, because I'm really taking like much better care of myself in my life. Like not only do I live healthier, but I also I think I learned just a lot of experiences from StarCraft 2 that made me maybe a more whole person in a way, a little bit less vulnerable to just events in my life and in my private life, but as well as in my professional life. But yeah, I think it's going good, and if I keep it up, it's gonna yield more results still.
So actually, on this topic there, where you said like you felt almost as though it made you a more whole person, so not just even a player, and also talking about like the mental strains of being a pro as well, I always feel like, unfortunately, people kind of they kind of look at the players who get nervous, or they have any mental issues, or they get worn down, and they think like, oh, he's just going to figure something out one day and then there'll be no problem anymore. And so what they're unfortunately doing is usually comparing them to people. I'm thinking of someone like a Stefano, who just seem naturally to not have those issues. Like they're almost pre-selected to just be good in that sense. They don't get pressured as much. Whereas for the player who's got a lot of nerve issues, odds are they're just a nervous person in those scenarios. They're always going to have it. It's like managing it almost. It's not like it's something that a light's just going to switch one day. They have to learn to manage it in some way. So is this something across your career where you've picked up some things that have helped you kind of become more stable? That's
actually a good point. That I came to the same conclusion with the help of Robert, who's he's a performance psychologist who's been talking to me for over a year now, and he helped me greatly. And like one of the things we've been working on is, in the past I hated my emotions when playing, and my goal was to become more of a robot, to find a way to shut out emotions. And nowadays I learned to more accept those emotions and try to shape them in a way that makes me play okay still. So actually it's kind of funny, because what I found out over the past half year is that apparently I play pretty well when I'm angry. So sometimes it happens now that I get really upset after a game, but then I try to make that anger, feeling of sadness, and transform it into anger. Just thinking about my opponent in a way that makes me a little bit more aggressive, and that I really don't want to lose, because I just get a little bit mad. And then it's easier to play when I'm angry than when I'm sad, because when I'm sad I'm worried. When I'm worried, I get distracted, because I start thinking, what are people gonna say after I lose this game? I'm such a shit player. I don't deserve to be here. And all those thoughts start cycling through your head when you're in a worried state. But when I'm angry, I just think about how I'm gonna kill that player in the game, and how I can finish him off, and how can I punish his style that in that moment I find to be absolutely stupid, and I really don't want to lose to that. And then it can be distracting. You need to be careful not to get too angry, but just a little bit of a state of aggravation is good, I think.
So this is an interesting topic, because actually I've heard basically all the pros I've ever talked to who had nerves like that, they always talk about it like that, like they're trying to have this game where they just don't feel anything, and they think to themselves that the player who's really, really good naturally, he just never gets nervous at all. Whereas if you talk to some of those players, they'll even say like, oh, I didn't think I could win in the final, or yeah, I was nervous, but they still perform anyway. And so the way I've heard it described is like almost like a meditative aspect, where the emotion exists, you just don't necessarily let it like negatively affect you. And so
try to shape it, basically, and shape it into something that is even positive, because nerves can be good. That's actually something that Nazgul told me like way back in 2010 or 11. He said the fact that I get nervous is a good thing, because it means I care about the thing a lot, and I'm just worried that I'm not gonna live up to it. But if I learn to let those nerves be something that makes me more focused and heightens my skill a little bit, and because there's people who perform better offline than online, and most people perform worse offline than online because of nerves. But you can learn to make emotions are there for a reason, and emotions can make us faster and stronger and even more focused. So it's an incredibly complicated topic, but yeah, I think everybody needs to figure it out for himself how it works exactly.
Because I heard it described once when someone was, I think it was actually in a book about Zen Buddhism, and someone described it like this. It was like a really good quote. It said something like, if you're like worried about something that happened in the past, or you're worried about what's going to happen in the future, the problem there is like you're connecting to like something where you can't change either of those things. Whereas if you're only thinking about the moment, which is what you actually can change, usually you won't be worried, because worries tend to be connected with what happened before or what might happen now. So if you think about it in a game, someone described it like, I heard an MMA fighter who was coaching someone describe it like this. He said to his like students, like, if you're in a fight and you're scared or you're worried or you think like, oh, he's going to beat me up and all this stuff, like, the reason why you shouldn't worry that you're thinking these things is because the way you win the fight is just by being like fundamentally sound at fighting. Okay, so every time you start to think those things, just think to yourself like, is my footwork good right now? Am I like pacing my breathing? Because if you think about those things, those are like in the moment, one thing I can do now to like put myself forwards. And he explained it like this, like, no emotion, positive or negative, can actually like win you the fight, because what will win you the fight again is like punching him more, or like controlling him more, pacing himself more. And so within StarCraft, I thought the way this applies more is like the really good players, if you think of like someone like TaeJa, Flash or Innovation or something, they just look like no matter what happens in the game, they're just thinking like, okay, what do I do now though? What do you think on this topic?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you can get carried away by emotion very quickly, that you start spiraling into a moment where you don't think about StarCraft 2 anymore. You think about what happens if I win or lose. It happens when you're about to win too. It can be like, oh my god, if I win this fight now and it looks like I'm gonna win it, I'm gonna go home with $10,000. And then your brain our brain likes to associate things, like, and then it starts associating like, what am I gonna do with those $10,000, and how am I gonna spend it? Maybe I shouldn't spend it so much, and like, even if those thoughts aren't conscious to you, they happen like anyway. Like our brain just does that kind of stuff. So actually, for the longest time, I tried not to look at prize pools of tournaments, just because like it's scary. Like, oh my god! Like, if I win this, I go home with a lot of money, or if I lose this, I go home with nothing. But nowadays, I don't think I care as much more about that money anymore. And as you're saying, just focusing on the game itself is something you have to consciously just teach yourself. I think StarCraft 2 is a lot about that kind of mental discipline, that whenever a certain train of thoughts comes up, you have to check in your brain, like, is it a thought I want to have, or is it a thought I want to not want to have? So you need to just condition yourself when those thoughts come up to stop thinking that and think about StarCraft 2 again. And I think I've been a little bit more successful with that in the like immediate past, that as soon as I start thinking about not the game, I have like this switch I flip and just, okay, focus on the game again. And it's kind of like a mandala I try to do at the beginning of a tournament match now. It sounds silly, but can help you a lot to just keep saying focus on StarCraft, focus on the game, keep focused, you're focused, you're focused. And you just say that over and over again in your head until you kind of try to get that state of flow. Because it's better to think to yourself, be focused, than think about something that is not StarCraft 2 related. And the best thing is if at the beginning and at crucial points where you have to make big decisions in StarCraft 2, you think consciously. But at any other point when you're playing, you don't think anything, basically. Because thinking is much slower than subconscious decisions. The tricky part is to learn when you let your subconscious just do things, and when you're at a state where you had a big fight and then you need to reassess consciously, do I really want to keep that offenses up? Like, you need to do a little bit of math, like how much damage did I do? How did it go in previous games? And then, then you need to think, okay, very specifically what I'm gonna do now. And then after you're done with that, like, it should take like 10 seconds, you're gonna try to go subconscious again, because you're gonna be much faster and more precise.
I actually, from my experience doing interviews with people over the years, this is actually a problem what you're describing here, like having to learn how to switch off your conscious thought, that intelligent people are plagued by, basically. It'll sound rude, but someone who doesn't think as much actually would have an advantage in this area, because I've known some players who were very brilliant, like 1v1 Quake players, but they were so intelligent with how they would analyze the game when they weren't in the game, that during an actual match, they would start thinking to themselves, overthinking, and like thinking like, oh, I'll double back and I'll double back again, like, and they would be thinking way more than their opponent could have possibly been thinking, but as a result,
Same thing happened to me when I was playing Lucifon in WCS yesterday, when I lost him. Basically, in the first game, I crushed him with a build order. which just counters his build order. So in the next 2 games I thought I'm gonna counter what counters my build order, and then he just did the same build order twice in a row, and I got killed. Even if I wouldn't have thought that he thinks that I think, I would just have played the same build order again and win against him. So you gotta really be careful not to get like caught in those cycles of overthinking things. That's definitely true.
Because I feel like part of what naturally leads to people wanting to think like that in a game is that once the game's over and there's no pressure, you can actually analyze the game, then you'll see all your mistakes, okay, and you'll think, oh, next time I'm there, I don't want to do that mistake. And so that'll sort of lead in the next game to maybe wanting to do that, okay. But the problem is, and part of why it's a little bit unfair the way we criticize players when we're just watching as an observer, is that we can analyze like that. Whereas I've heard it said, like I saw an interview with the Brood War player Bisu, where he won like a huge match over Flash in the Pro League, and he described it as like, when he was describing himself winning, he didn't say like, oh, and then I made this great decision there and I thought, oh, what's he going to do next, and I'll do this. Instead he said like, oh, at this certain point in the game everything was just going amazing, my hands felt like they were moving so fast, and it's almost like it sounded like he wasn't even connected in, you know, he was just playing. And I've read a lot about sports psychology, right, where they say something along the lines that what you should try to do is practice however you want to play in the game, and then the idea is once you're in the game you don't need to think anymore. Like even if you do something wrong in that game, better not to hesitate and just fix it next time in practice. And the idea is you're almost making like a feedback loop, like you do it in practice, and then in the ideal scenario would be you just go into the server and you just subconsciously do everything, and it would just work. I mean, it sounds like this is something you've come to the conclusion of. Well,
yeah, it's also because I've been reading a lot about it.
Okay.
And in one book I read that is called The Art of Learning, which is one of my favorite books.
Good book, I've read.
Yeah, and I'm rereading it at the moment because I thought when the first time I read it, I probably didn't catch everything, because now I have a better understanding of it. It's called Building Your Trigger, basically, and he's like a TaeJa. Like he was a chess player as a child and as a teenager, and then he got into the martial arts aspect of TaeJa. And what he's doing is trying to, how do I describe it? Trying to cut his moves into like as many small pieces as possible, and then you learn those tiny parts of a movement like 1,000 times until you do the next move. And so you don't train the complete system at the same time, but you try to learn every single aspect that is so tiny and you do it over and over until you perfected it. So it becomes a subconscious thing that just your body does. Your mind doesn't really do it. It's just like, it just happens when that applies. And building a trigger in his context is that he tries to do the same things before a match over and over again. Like not necessarily like training wise, but have the same impulses, and like he maybe watches the same movie or drinks the same beverage, eats the same food. And when you do that again and again before your training matches, you should do it before your tournament match as well. So you're gonna feel kind of at home, and you know, your body just goes into that mind of playing StarCraft. Because whenever I eat a banana and drink an Earl Grey tea, and when I listen to that song, after that I play StarCraft. So if I do that in a tournament as well as in practice, I'm not gonna worry so much about all the other consequences, because my brain is just primed to play. Like whenever that happens, StarCraft 2 is on.
When you were saying earlier about how sometimes in a game you could be winning or you could be losing for that matter, and the problem is you start thinking of like the consequences or what the implications of that could be, I started thinking about actually the HomeStory Cup 6, the one that Snoop won, the first one, where you were losing against Symbol, because before the game was over you were already like overwhelmed emotionally. Was this an example of that?
Definitely, because I think that was like one of my first pretty decent results again after a long time, and I really needed that emotionally. I was like so desperate to finally show people again that I'm not just some overrated guy on TL that, you know, is living off the fame he did in the beta, and that was haunting me like constantly. And back then I knew like I need some amount of breakthrough win that like frees me from that haunted feeling again. And definitely like it just kind of like that bubble bursted, and I realized to myself I can do it. And that was a little bit too much at the moment, and then I started not trusting my skill again. Like when I was playing against Simple, I was playing really well, but then I thought like, oh my god, like I'm winning, but now I maybe need to mix it up, and really I should just have stick to which I practiced.
Okay, so since we just talked there, you sort of gave a brief summary of how you felt about your career almost there in a few sentences. So to actually go back to the first part, right, when I was looking over all of your career, I like managed to grasp it all into like 3 different phases. Okay, so I'm going to start with phase 1. Phase 1 goes from about August 2010, so like around the release of the game, like just before it, in the beta phase, to April of 2011. And basically, for each of these, I put like a short summary of how I described it, and then we can talk about some of the events. So for that fit period, I just put decent, because you had 3 5th place finishes. Okay, now 2 of these were like MLG Dallases, where it was all European and North American players, and then you had the IEM Cologne, where you beaten by Moro, who won the tournament. Around this phase, this is where you've just gone to Korea, like partway through that span. It's just started real competition beyond the beta. Like realistically, what kind of place were you in terms of how much you practiced, or how you thought of yourself, or how good you actually thought you were?
At that point, I was practicing a lot, maybe almost more than any other point. But the problem was I didn't do anything but play StarCraft, basically. Okay. So right before I went to Korea, and that's funny, I can actually feel a little bit here, just from the memory. Right before I went to Korea, I already started having pain, but I didn't take it seriously. At that point, I just felt invulnerable. I never had any physical issues like that. And I just kept playing and playing and playing, and the pain got worse, and I didn't do anything about it because I was an idiot. So that was the main issue, I think. I mean, and also I was definitely too sure of myself, because I kind of went from 0 to like lots of intention. Like before that, I was not anybody who ever got like, who was in the spotlight. And I think I'm a person who's to some extent I'm a little bit of a split person. In one way, I think very highly of myself, almost in an arrogant way, that I think like that I have the potential to be like one of the best people. What I believe very much is human potential, and I think every single person has insane amounts of potential what you can do, and almost everybody can like be a superstar and be like an incredible scientist or something. And knowing that, I think of myself that of course I can do that, and because I know that, I should be able to just do that, and think of myself that I can do it. But on the other hand, I have like extreme self-doubt because of myself setting the bar so high for like what a human being can do, that I don't manage to get nearly close to the bar as I would like to be. And I think at that point in my life, I wasn't really aware of that habit of myself yet, and that I just thought, okay, I'm gonna be amazing and I'm gonna win everything because this is what I wanted to do all my life. And then it didn't quite work out, and I think that did a lot to me emotionally.
When you went to Korea, you went there and the original plan was to stay for 9 months. In the first 2 GSLs, these were the ones where no foreigners made it deep. Yeah. You got like into the GSL, which actually itself was an accomplishment at the time, but then you got knocked out quite early. But then you came back from Korea after only something like 3 months. And at the time you cited like, oh, I've got like the CTS problem. And also it was sort of implied, although you didn't say it directly, that like maybe you were missing home, or you maybe couldn't handle being away from your family or something. Like, what can you tell us about why you had to cut that period short?
Yeah, was it only 3 months? I think it was
something like that. You came back in. You went in August and you came back in November.
Yeah, that's much longer. Well, okay, there's several things that was going on. First of all, even though I'm from a pretty big family, I have 3 brothers, and when I was younger, we had a pretty small apartment with 6 people in it. I still went crazy in Korea just from the fact how many people were in one place, and I was used to like people being extremely like respectful when somebody, like in my family, when somebody is loud, you just tell him and he's not going to be loud anymore. But at the same time, I grew up as a person who's never gonna impose himself like too much on somebody else. If he's being like rude or loud, I'm just gonna try to accept it. And exactly that kind of happened in Korea. It was always noisy, and I was sleeping, but people like kept opening the door to the gaming room and switched on the light and off. And most Koreans are not really bothered by that, because their culture is much more noisy, and like people are used to like growing up in an environment kind of like that. If you notice, Koreans, they can always, like, not all Koreans, but lots of Koreans can sleep anywhere. Like, you're gonna see a Korean at an event, then it's super loud, but he's able to sleep, and they're just pretty good at that. And I was probably not sleeping more than 2 or 3 hours a day most of the time, and sometimes I got more sleep and I was so exhausted I couldn't handle it anymore. I think that wore me down a lot, because not having enough sleep is pretty terrible, especially when I'm trying to do a texting thing like StarCraft 2. And then, yeah, that hit me emotionally. I had problems with my hands. I was extremely disappointed by how I was performing then, because I set myself such a high bar, and I think lots of people thought I'm gonna be the foreigner who can like really excel in Korea, and like I was kind of the foreign hope back then, even though I was maybe a little bit unsatisfied. So it was just a lot of pressure that I couldn't handle.
One of the things that, from hearing a lot of stories of Westerners who've gone to Korea, it sounds, okay, we can talk about the in-game aspect of how difficult it is to practice, but it actually sounds like one of the things people aren't prepared for is if you actually go and you want to live in a team house and you want to be around people, what people forget is, even when you're at home, even if you're with your family, okay, you can go to your room and you can be alone for like 6 hours, or if you really want to, okay, today I'll just get up at 10 in the morning instead of 8. Whereas instead, if someone's making you wake up at a certain time and you have to eat food with other people, etc., like I've heard from some of the other foreigners, like it's like really difficult to be forced to do that almost. Is this like an issue?
Yeah, in general, I think StarCraft 2 players are people who probably are not used to a very strict lifestyle overall. Most people they are pretty relaxed about like going into a day and stuff. And we had like fixed lunch, dinner, and breakfast times, and if you like didn't go there, like you just didn't get food, but obviously you could take care of it yourself in some way. But just the fact that people are always around you and you don't have a place to retreat to just be with your own thoughts, even when you go outside, because Seoul is such a crowded city that in Germany I can go to a park like when it's kind of late, or I just go a little bit more outside into nature, and I'm just by myself, and I'm a person who needs that. There's very few people that I know that I can be around in a very intimate and close way for a long time without feeling uncomfortable. And in Korea, I didn't have it. I didn't have any sanctuary where I can just be by myself, because even when I went outside, the city is always there. It's always loud. And I think especially Europeans, well, probably Americans too, just find that very difficult, that kind of overload of senses, and that overload of there's always noise and light and everything is always running, and you never catch a break.
Let me think how to describe this. Okay, so when in this early phase of your career, so in the beta, I can understand definitely why you became so popular, because when it's the beta, first of all, the tournaments, they don't have this, a lot of them are online, they don't have the same like gravitas, that people aren't going to get nervous playing in the final of a beta tournament. And not also, because the game's very new, then just trying totally weird off the wall stuff is not only actually going to be successful, but it's going to look so cool that no one's ever tried that before. And so one of the positives of your career was that you got this reputation for being a very flamboyant player in game, trying very creative stuff like abstract thinking. But then I also get the feeling, and this is what I want to ask you about, is if that ever haunted you to a degree, because it felt like as this phase came along where you'd had the good period and then it was heading into the worst one, if your results are going bad, okay, you can't win the match, but people are expecting you to put on a show here or to do something crazy, or even if you're playing this top player, at least make it an interesting match by doing something nutty so that people still want to watch. Is this true to at all?
I'm not sure if that was like, if I was ever like at that point consciously aware of that, but there's a pretty good chance that subconsciously it directed me into a way of playing that might not have been the most successful way of doing it. I think lots of that just comes from my own personal way how I see RTS, but it might have been badly reinforced by just reputation.
So what do you mean when you say your own way of thinking? What do you... What's different from how you see the game?
Well, most people like to play build orders, and one of the reasons why I switched to Zerg is because in some way I don't believe in build orders, but in a completely dynamic, reactive, just on the fly of way of playing StarCraft 2. It is in some way it's a pretty big flaw. I'm somebody who doesn't watch a lot of games. Like, I don't watch a lot of replays, and I don't watch a lot of VODs or like live streams, because I honestly prefer to find like my own way of how the game is done. And I think in general I have a different philosophy how an RTS works than most people. So just from that aspect, I think it's just normal that my game looks a little bit different than of most people. But then it can like bite me in my ass, because sometimes I should have those more standard builds that just are a little bit more solid, especially in certain situations. Like, as I was like, I like to play a very complex style of StarCraft 2, which can make me look very silly. Can also make my opponent look very silly. Like, let's say my A game and I play the best game of my life, I can beat somebody who's on a theoretical equal level like me. I can beat him so hard that he looks like a complete noob. But when I don't have that perfect day, he can completely crush me because I tried to do something that I'm not really capable to do of that day. Even though that player's on the same level, there's more variance. And variance can be good when you try to, first of all, when you try to become better, and when you play against somebody who's better than you. But variance is not so good when you play against somebody who's maybe a little bit worse or much worse than you, because variance is always on the side of the underdog.
Yeah. So this is an interesting topic, because it comes into another thing I wanted to ask you about, which goes like this. The problem with the very creative style, and when creative, what we tend to mean here is like you're trying things that maybe even you've only tried a few times. And that's why it's going to be so successful against the opponent, is that when it works, then it's going to reinforce to you that like no matter what sort of a scenario, I could do something crazy now that and maybe win a game I shouldn't win a game. But the problem with it is, I get the feeling, if you want to be the best player, is that if you ever look at any of the best players, especially in RTS, they tend to be the most fundamentally sound players in the game. Yeah. And so what's incredible about them is they can do the build that you know is coming, but they'll beat you with execution. And so the way I want to describe it was like this, because this is like actually how I see a contrast between the West and the East in terms of Korea and the foreigners. So a lot of foreigners, even when they practice the ladder and even when they practice builds, they sort of practice everything at once. Like they'll just play games, essentially, play an opponent. And so, yeah, they'll get practice in every area, but some games that thing won't happen that they want to practice, or another game something different will happen. And they're sort of, in a tiny way, practicing everything. Whereas I've seen in the Korean Brood War houses, the way they used to bring a new player into the house was they'd literally like break him down like boot camp style. Like they'd say, like, you're going to do this one build this week. And the idea was, after a month, you're going to have 3 builds that you can do in theory as best as you can do them. And so it's almost like if you think of like, if you learn like a language or something, you often get taught that there are rules when you're learning the language. And later on, someone tells you, oh, by the way, that isn't actually a rule. If you want, you can start a sentence with and or but or whatever. But the idea is you are going to be more in line with what's successful by thinking there's set rules in very narrow area. But in theory, to become the best, beyond that, you're going to eventually break out and realize when you can break the rules or you can do something different. And so I feel like you're someone where I just suspect that there's a period where you must have like disciplined your game in some way to get to this consistency. So what can you say on this topic?
It's first of all, part of my training nowadays is always that I do try to pin down builds that I might break out of. Like, but there has been a period, I think between like mostly like 2012 was maybe the main period of where I just tried to play straight up, like for 1 year. I tried to like have 1 build order or 2 build orders for each matchup, and my game became a lot less exciting, I think, in that period. But I kind of learned fundamentals I was lacking, and also that might be another reason why I switched to Zerg, because I felt like that race is gonna teach me to do that, because I know my mechanics were sloppy. I'm a fast player, but I'm a sloppy player. But playing Zerg doesn't allow you to be as sloppy as Terran. So I just started losing so much because of the sloppiness, which taught me to be more disciplined, because as Zerg you need to structure much more than as Terran. So I think that's, yeah, mostly 2012 I just tried to do that.
In terms of the race picking, that's something else I'd noticed, which was in that first phase I discussed. So you start out as random, and then you had like the okay result in Cologne, you were in Korea. Then you switched to Zerg, and you had like this 5th at MLG. Then a few months later, you switched to Terran, and you had another 5th. Why were you switching like every few months here? Like, what was it, like a grass is always greener type thing? What would make you switch 3 times?
Well, the reason I played random was just to learn the game. Yeah. That was the only reason. And then I actually played Terran right away after that first. Okay. And I think the like first 2 switches was kind of, I just wasn't sure yet. I kind of excluded Protoss because I kept losing in PvP. And it just made me so angry because I thought, especially back then, it was such a stupid matchup. So I was between Zerg and Terran, but I couldn't really decide what I really want to be. And then it was also a little bit emotionally also connected to my RSI at some point that, okay, I'm not doing so well with Terran anymore. But if I switch to Zerg now, and I don't think I thought like that back then, but nowadays I can look at it like that. If I switch to Zerg now, the pressure is going to be off because people are not going to be expecting me to be playing well. So I'm going to have a little bit of a period where I can just be by myself and play the game, and nobody's going to judge me for losing. So it was a little bit of an escape, maybe. Like the constant switching of being like, nobody's going to expect me to win anything because you just switch races, so pressure is off.
Okay, at this point in the interview, when I talk about the phase 2 that I analyzed, anyone who's a TLO fan, just like hang in through this part, because this part isn't so good, but the story gets better towards the end, okay? So phase 2 lasts about 17 months, yeah. Long period of time. And when I had to summarize this, I just put appalling, placed outside of this top 16 yeah. In like 11 out of 12 significant offline tournaments. Like, the first question I want to ask on this topic, because that's like a very startling stat, is how do you not like just quit during that period? Like if you go 17 months and every time except one you never get to the top 16, and even that time you just got finished at the top 16, how do you not just like give up and say it's over? It's
funny that quitting was never an option, like ever. Like it's so strange because at that period I was really like, I don't want to use the term depressed because I think it's overused, but I was like, my life sucked. Like it didn't objectively suck because I'm traveling all over the world and having an awesome job and stuff, but I was so uncomfortable and unhappy with myself as a person. But I think the only thing that kept me going is the fact that I thought quitting is never an option, because I think I would never have been able to respect me as a person again if I quit now. Because I was still, and maybe it was a little bit of hubris, but I was still aware of the fact that I have potential to be one of the best people, like players on the planet. And I hated the fact so much that I can't show that. And I was so obsessed still with the fact that I can do it, that it kind of like it managed to like pull me through it. And also I have a ton of people that I'm incredibly grateful in my team and my family and my friends that for some reason never stopped believing in me. Like in Team TL, Victor never like even brought up the topic that if I don't perform better, I'm gonna be kicked from the team. Like, even though for myself I was like, I kept telling him like, dude, I don't deserve to be Team Liquid. Maybe you can like stop, like, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't have me anymore. Like I was kind of like a little bit like passive aggressive like that at that point. But yeah, they're like, I just had an awesome network of people that kept me sane. But at the same time, and I think that's the reason why I did so badly for a long time, I kind of pushed those people away because I was like, I felt at that point that I don't deserve to be on Team Liquid. I don't deserve to have that kind of friends, and don't deserve to be treated with respect anymore at this point. So I was kind of isolating myself, which made me feel much worse still. And I started becoming better and feeling much better when I started to build up those connections again with my family, friends, and team.
One of the things that I've always thought hasn't really been looked at by the community is, okay, think of it like this, okay? So when Huck was on Team Liquid, because Team Liquid is so beloved and the community site is Team Liquid, it means that automatically you're going to have an incredibly positive relationship with fans, etc. if you stay on Team Liquid. And then we all know when he went to EG, that's when like a lot of the flack started to build up for him. And so the funny thing is, for him, it's very easy to see it that, oh, this sucks because I used to get all this love from these people and now the same people are hating on me, and you know, if I do anything bad they're going to be all over me. But I've always thought there was even a flip side to that maybe he didn't consider, which goes like this: if you're in your position, or like Jinro or HeyPro, those guys were towards the end, it was going really badly, you get in the situation where you do really badly in the tournament, but then everyone's like, oh, don't worry about it, like you did awesome, like you're going to do so well next tournament. And so then when, for example, in your team you've got like Huck has a really good run, or Rhett has a good result every now and then, or even worse, Hero becomes an awesome player, the fact that people are saying that makes it feel like you're not even considered as like a real player or something. What do you think about this aspect? Because it sounds like it should be nice, but there's always the bad side to it.
Yeah, like people watching that, please don't get that wrong, because I know you mean well when you say stuff like that, but I hate it when people say, when I made a top 16 or top 8, or like back in the days when I made like even worse placements, if they say you did amazing, or like good job, like you did your best, and I'm like, no, for fuck's sake, I didn't do my best. If this is my best, like why am I a programmer if this is my best? Like, I hope this is not my best if I'm losing in the tournament like that, because else I seriously should be quitting. And I realize that people have like the sentiment behind is nice and positive and they just want to show their support, but it can be very patronizing when you read it in those phases where you're doing very badly. When you're doing better and you just had a good placement, and then the next tournament you don't do as well, and then people say it doesn't feel bad, but it feels really bad when you're on that period where you keep getting crushed and people say that.
How much of this long stretch of time was actually okay? So whenever a lot of pros, at least, if they lose, they always want to claim like, oh, it was me who just messed up that game, you know, my opponent didn't outplay me or anything, or oh, I just did one mistake, or oh, I have the nerves or something in this game. But there is a degree to which someone could be really good in practice and they can't show it in the server. So how much of this period was like performance issues, and how much was actual things wrong with your game, or you hadn't had the right approach to the game? Like what was the balance between the two?
That's difficult thinking back of it, because even though it sounds like making the excuse always like my hands, but there was such a long period where I was physically incapable, but I also think I made this kind of my dog passenger, that like because I have the bad hands, I cannot perform, and it was kind of like a constant excuse I could have like throughout that period, because whenever like I lost to the tournament, people are always gonna say, well, his hands are hurting, so obviously he's not gonna win. And the main issue was that I didn't start taking care of that seriously earlier, but and that having those issues kind of transformed my play in a way that I started playing styles that tried to end the game early.
Okay.
So
do you think your opponents knew that?
Maybe they knew that, but after a while I got just their reputation to be very all-in cheesy style of player. Maybe they didn't even think of the fact that it was because of my hands, but it was frustrating when I was playing like a half-an-hour game and I knew like I was kind of on a clock. Like the longer this game goes on, the more it's going to be hurting, the more mistakes I'm going to be doing. So instead of fixing my hands, I started fixing my gameplay, in the sense that I'm just going to try to end the game after 10 minutes because I'm feeling fine like for the first few minutes of the game, and then it's going to be no issue. I'm just going to be aggressive and end it. So it kind of played together, I think. Like one related to the other, and both made each other worse.
One of the interesting things was, as we go into like the third phase, where all the results start to get better and better and become very consistent, I did an interview with Huck where he made a point that I thought was really interesting because of the fact he'd been to Korea so many times. I asked him, like, how could you have been in Korea for so long initially, and yet when you would come back to the foreign tournaments, like initially you'd have no better results, you know, you'd be finishing like 5th to 8th or even worse. And he told me that what he'd learned about practice was like it takes a few months for the practice to actually show up in the tournaments. You feel in the practice like, oh, I'm awesome now, but it doesn't sort of kick in until a few months later. Like, had you already sort of started to fix things at the end of this period, like the bad period, that would then later show up when you started doing well again, like towards the end of 2012?
Yeah. Let me think. It's hard to look back so far and look at the timeline. I think the most important thing that like got me on the right course again is, and once again, I'm grateful for Nasco for doing that for me. He basically said, come back from Korea and just stay at my apartment for like as long as you like. And he said like, my girlfriend and I are just gonna take care of everything for you. You don't have to worry about anything. You know, you just can play or not play and do sport or read books and do whatever you want. And we just they just were there, like, and he just at that point helped me like get my life a little bit more together again, and I started doing more sport and being much more relaxed. One of the reasons why I got the physical pain is because I used to tense up like crazy. Like I couldn't sleep properly because I was constantly tense, and when I was playing I felt really pressured, and I was like always playing like really badly, like my shoulders were tense, my arms were tense, and all that tension like is gonna damage you. And I think at that period I had the first like time where I started to actively learn how to relax and to try not to care as much. And there was also lots of like personal stuff that at this point I needed to fix, and that was a nice time, just like 2 months off that I was at a very nice place taken care of by people, and could just like start putting everything together again and then start slowly playing more games.
So the event that I, at least when I was looking in research, that I tried to identify that seemed like in terms of actual results turned things around was Dreamhack Bucharest, because this is the event where you made it to the round of 8 and the person you lost to was Nurture, who won the event anyway. So it's an event where you could even feel like, who even knows if I could have gone further. Do you think of this as a turning point yourself? Because beyond this, I'll give some of the stats later, but you have like a lot of round of 8s, a lot of round 16s, like it gets very consistent at that point.
Yeah, Bucharest was definitely very nice for me, because it was the first time that I basically played in a booth again in a very long time, so that was just a nice milestone. And I felt for the first time that I played close to the style I can play in training. I played in a tournament, and for the longest time my training skill was okay, but it was so much worse in tournaments. And at Bucharest it was at a close level, like I was still better at training than I should in the tournament. But yeah, that was I don't think I really think about Bucharest that much at that point, but
what comes to mind for you then if I say that?
It's not really a tournament event.
Okay.
It's much more, I think, basically in 2011, first I was doing that like gaming house in Sweden, but that also didn't go so well for me. And like the last half year in 2011, I was living completely by myself. And I just had my own apartment, and there was nobody else there, just me. And I think that was very cleansing for me. Just I had no responsibilities towards anybody else. Nobody was annoying me or being annoyed by me. And it was like half a year. At the end I got a little bit depressed just by living by myself, and Swedish winter was very dark. There's no light. But I think that period helped me get my shit together a little bit more, because I had just had my own thoughts and could kind of look back at that period where everything was going well, just from like a little bit of a distant view. And then after that I came back to Germany, went back to Korea, and you know, that's when things started going a little bit better. Okay.
So an interesting thing I noticed though, and that's why I'd actually like circled this area when you first made a round of 8 after a long time, was what was unusual was after you made this round of 8, okay, so you've got back to like a playoff type scenario, you have this really great streak where, okay, you'd made it into the top 16 in 11 out of 12 tournaments that I found, which was like offline ones, obviously we're talking about here. And you'd made it out of the group stage something like 9 out of 12 times. And so this was the weird thing. You had all these round of 8s, round of 16s in tournaments where round of 8 or round of 16 was where the playoffs would begin. And so almost every time you're getting out of the group stage, but then it would always be the first playoff point that you would drop at. And I noticed this a while ago, but it kept even continuing past that, and I was like, that's a bit spooky. So how much? And so the weird thing was also, it didn't even seem to matter who was in your groups. Like you could have a totally sick group of death. You'd always get out of the group of death, but then vice versa, you could have like an easier round of 16 matchup, and you'd fall there in the playoff play. Like, why did you become so good at getting out of groups, and what's the problem when you get to the playoff stage at this time?
Well,
have you ever noticed this yourself?
Yeah, of course. That's a big topic. Like people that I talk to a lot about my performance. And first of all, at least in the past 4 months, we have noticed something. I always lose my first match of the day. And that's okay if you're in a group, but if you're in the player and the elimination rounds, losing the first match of the day is usually when you're going home. So that's something we need to work on, because I've been losing an incredible amount of first maps in a best of 3. If you look further at those stats, like I have so many games where I go 0-1 and then I win 2-1, and I think. We were talking about the trigger a little bit earlier, but I think in a bad way that losing has become my trigger of performing better, which I hopefully I can find a better trigger than losing in the first place. But I think when you start going to a top 16 or top 8 so many times in a row, it's also a little bit of a mental block, because you've done it 4 times in a row, and you kind of I don't want to do it the 5th time. I finally want to do the top 4. So it's something like just the next step I have to overcome in mental blockages I had throughout my career, and I'm pretty confident it's getting better. Like the last couple of top of 8s, I felt less stressed and less nervous in the match that would lead to the top 4. It just didn't align yet, but I'm comfortable it's gonna happen soon. And if I continue that kind of streak with a top 4 for a while, then that's gonna be okay. But eventually I want to finally get that top 1.
Because I also noticed another thing, which is that it's one thing if you get to another level, okay, and you lose there. Like there are some players who do just always lose in the round of 8. That's actually because they're only the 8th best player in the tournament. That's realistically where they should place. But another interesting stat I noticed when I looked over this period was an extraordinary amount of times you lost to someone who made it to the final anyway. So you were getting these sick bracket draws. It was something ridiculous, like 6 out of 8 times or 5 out of 7 or something. Like the person went all the way to the final, even if it was just the round of 16 you got drawn against them. I mean, did you ever feel unlucky in this sense? What were you until you look back on this, it's easy to just look at each tournament and go, oh, I fucked that up, I did that wrong or whatever. But some of these might have been 3rd places, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's kind of unlucky, but at the same time I think because I want to stay in esport for quite some time as a competitor, I'm gonna have a period where I'm gonna be very lucky and win tournaments that I'm not supposed to win. So it's just, you can't look at that and be emotional about it, I think, because it's just probabilities, and eventually it's gonna even out if you go to enough tournaments.
The thing I thought you could analyze positively of this is that it suggests, like I say, you're not losing in the round of 8 always because you're the 8th best player.
But
sometimes
I'm supposed to do a little bit better than I was.
Well, yeah, you could potentially be getting.
Yeah, I think that's nice.
Do you think it's true though? I mean, do you think practice had actually built up and it just hasn't broken through in that sense?
I think I should be doing a little bit better than I am doing at tournaments. I'm not made out of material to take home a gold medal just yet.
Okay.
But over that period of making all the top 8 placements, I don't think I stagnated in skill in the sense that I'm at that top 8 level, but I'm not supposed, I'm supposed to always be top 8. And I think I've improved over that period. Just maybe the first couple of top of 8, I even played worse, or significantly worse than the last couple of top 8 placements. So it's just, I'm just trying to focus mostly on how my improvements are, and I think there I'm optimistic.
In terms of pinning down a 1 or 2 tournaments, so we talked about the symbol one at HomeStory Cup, but are there a couple of other ones that stand out? If you hadn't have got that opponent, or if things had just gone differently at one that you really felt like you were going to make it further? I mean, I was thinking there was the one where you had IEM Katowice, the last Wings of Liberty one, but you get drawn against First, who actually just owns the whole event. Then you had the WCS one where you have to play MVP, and everyone's like, oh, MVP's all washed up, and then he obviously wins the whole tournament. Like, which tournaments actually stand out to you during the last, say, 9 months where it really was like a bad draw that day for you? You should have gone better, you know.
Well, first of all, like I get drawn against TaeJa a lot.
Yeah,
and,
3 times I think.
Yeah, and I lost all 3 times of them. And at HomeStory Cup, I almost finally beat him, but I think that's where I feel really unlucky when I face TaeJa, because he's always somebody who can win the entire tournament. And I think in at least one of the cases he did. I think also
and won the assembly,
and I lost to him. And then at HomeStory Cup, he got first place, and Snoot, so 2 out of 3 times again he won the tournament. And Snoot and I were talking about it, that I got really unlucky because we both had the entirely same score in a way. Because I played. Snoot played Jan in the semifinals and beat him 3-2, and I played Jan in the semifinals and I beat him 3-2. Yeah, and I beat him 3-2, and I lost to TaeJa 2-3 in the semis, and Snoot lost to TaeJa 2-3 in the finals. So we could have easily switched position just from going on the other side of the bracket. But at least I took 3rd place, so 3rd or 2nd. That's fine, I guess. But Katowice is probably one of those worst examples that you were saying. Like First, at that time was not somebody people looked at too much, and so when you first lose to him, and he's a Korean, but that doesn't mean he's supposed to be the champion. But then he goes on to win the entire tournament. So it was, But I would say TaeJa is the biggest thorn in my eye when it comes to like being coupled with somebody in a tournament.
That's actually something I wanted to ask about, was the fact that you've played TaeJa so many times. Ignoring the fact he's a teammate, so I don't want you just to shower praise on him because he's a teammate. Like, he's someone where it seems like he gets so deep in tournaments, people feel like he always should win the tournament. Sometimes he doesn't, but when he plays you, obviously, he's always held it over you. What makes him so unbeatable for you? If he can lose to other people sometimes who are a similar level.
Actually, I think in general, I do pretty badly against teammates because I think too much about it. I'm maybe emotionally too invested in the even it sounds bad, especially coming from a competitor, but maybe I care too little when I play against team member, because to me Team Liquid is like almost like my identity. So when I'm playing against a teammate, I'm like, oh, that's nice, like a Team Liquid member is gonna be in the next round.
Okay. That's bad.
I know that's bad, and I'm aware of that. I might be thinking, like, I'm not entirely sure if it is like that, but if it is like that, it's definitely something I need to work on. But TaeJa he's definitely the better player than I am at the moment, so it's not like it's just because I'm doing worse against him than I should. Like, he's definitely the favorite, so winning 3 times out of 3 times doesn't necessarily mean anything yet. But he's also somebody who knows my style very well, and he's a very smart player, I think, and that helps a lot against people who play like me, because I play a little bit. I don't play, like, sometimes I don't play the most effective way, which can be good because it's different. But if a player has figured you out and you try to go for that non-effective style, it's very bad. So against TaeJa now I have to mix up my style and play differently, and that puts me a little bit out of my comfort zone.
There's actually a tournament this year I went to ask you about, because just on paper, it looks like you did really well, and yet you only finished in the round of 16, okay? So it was the Dreamhack Stockholm that was in April. Because in this tournament, okay, you beat 4GG, you beat Sase, you beat Nurcho in the group stage. Then in the round of 16, you play Nanewa and lose 1-2 to him, and he goes on, obviously, like, come second in the whole tournament. Yeah. So it looks bad, like, oh, round of 16, like, forget that one. But actually, like, that's a pretty legit run, right? That could be, like, a top run in another tournament. Like, what was this event like?
That event was nice for my confidence because of the same reasons that you just said. Like, I beat a lot of good players. I think I beat JYP as well in the tournament. So I wasn't really mad after losing to Nanewa, because obviously he's one of the best foreigners, but I was still kind of upset about the draw. If you go through like 2 very hard groups, to be fair, the entire tournament was very stacked, so there wasn't really many easy groups. You feel like you deserve to get a little bit of an easier round of 16 than Naniva, but I think overall it was a good tournament for me just to show myself that I can beat all those players. Like, the more people you beat in your career, the better it is, even if it wasn't obviously, but what I mean by that is if you beat somebody in a tournament already, you're gonna feel better against going against him the next time. Even if you just beat him in a group stage, if you ever meet that player in the top 4 again, you can tell yourself, I already beat that player at least one time, and that helps.
When you got drawn against MVP in WCS Europe round of 8, okay, you told everyone, oh, so I wanted to play, this is going to be awesome. And I can understand there is a mentality, okay, where if you really do feel great, then actually it's going to be an even better story if you beat MVP and then you go and you win the tournament anyway. How much of that was like, was there even a factor where you were trying to psych yourself up that it was good to get MVP? Was he really actually weak at the time, did you think?
Like, I definitely remember generally that when I saw the draw, I actually smiled and was happy. Like, it wasn't like something I just tweeted. And because just like my CVT was by far my strongest matchup at that point, and I was only practicing CVT. So I was like, I'm invincible. Like, you can throw any turn at me. Like, I'm just gonna own him. He's just, I mean, it's MVP. Like, even better name, bigger name, more glory I can take home. Because right now my CVT is so great. And then he had a build order that I just couldn't handle at all, and he destroyed me. I definitely maybe was trying to psych me up a little bit, but one reason for that might be that he was the biggest name I have played in a long time that I thought I have a really good chance at beating.
Okay.
So I felt like this is a good opportunity for me. If I show people that I can beat the 3-time GSL champion, that's great. But then he did play very smart and very good. And also, I have to admit, like, he was smarter than we hoped he is. My brother figured out his barcode, and we looked at all his build orders and all his ladder games, and we tried to find all replays from all kinds of players.
He didn't play
and he never played that build. So I was like, this build he's playing is brilliant. Like, I can counter that. And then he had a completely hidden build that he never practiced on ladder and prepared very well. And it was just, he was more intelligent than me in that series. So definitely deserved win there.
So that's something I want to ask about, is the fact that no matter what period of MVP's career, even in his slumps, if you ever see his best of 5 record, it's absolutely ludicrous, because it seems like in best of 5, especially where you've got room to try things out, he's the master of preparing for the series. I want to ask about how well you thought he prepared. You sort of touched on it there, because of the fact that in your own career, best of 5 has been a problem for you. I think you've played 7 and you've only won 2 of them or something. And so what's more difficult about best? It's because to a fan, okay, they'll think to themselves, well, if you can win the best of 3 over someone, you just have to win one more game. What's different about a best of 5 and preparing, and what goes on then in terms of the mind games and stuff?
Best of 5s are, they're very different than best of 3s actually. First of all, you can throw in an all-in much more comfortably, because if you lose an all-in in a best of 3, it's almost over basically. But in a best of 5, people feel much more comfortable to do that, because it's just one map out of potentially 5. On the other hand, losing to an all-in also doesn't do as much impact. So single maps don't count as much, which I think makes it mentally a little bit easier at the beginning, but it becomes way more taxing as the thing goes on, because a best of 3 is over so quickly. You don't really have time to have second thoughts and regrets. And if it's 1-1, there's only one more match, or if it's 1-0 or 0-1, you're behind the map. Either you win that map and then it's only one more map, or you just lose it right away there, so you can't have time to think about it. But when you're down 2-0, that's where it's very mentally different, because already 2 games happened, and you're gonna have to win 3 maps in a row, and that's just something that you need a lot of fortitude to. And what is also different about best of 5s is it just favors the better player a lot, and the more consistent player. So and usually you have when you're playing best MVP, he's an extremely experienced and consistent player, so that's why best of fives are just very good against him. It's just always better for the more experienced favorite person.
How have you yourself actually progressed in terms of trying to get better at best of five, though? Because a key result is like beating Hyun in a best of five, even if it's like the third place decider and people can say it doesn't matter as much. That's obviously like a big result.
Yeah, even though I'm the master of consolation matches, I've been winning all my 5th place matches and 3rd place matches, and that and group stages is what I'm good at. But I feel like I'm gonna be better at best of fives nowadays, because I feel more like I deserve to be playing with people in best of fives, and also just because I'm gonna have more best of five experiences. But in terms of getting better, I try to just practice more best of fives in custom games. It's better than just playing ladder at best of ones, but you just kind of need to get used to how do people act in best of fives. So when I play a best of five with somebody in practice, I try to go through the veto process. We have a map pool, probably the map pool we're going to be playing at the next tournament. We both veto a map, and then you just go through the 5 different maps. So that just mimicking what's going to happen in a tournament in training is what you got to do.
The other side of what I was describing before, where even if you get round of 8s or you get round of 16s, if you look at the names, you can go, oh, well, actually, maybe that was better, or you can talk it up. The thing is, no matter what someone does, they can't talk down a really nice placing. So even though you had some good people you beat, what was the significance of actually knowing that you placed 3rd at that HomeStory Cup, and like actually you had the 3 next to your name, not like an 8, not a 16. It doesn't matter who you played now.
It's made me really happy, because it's actually the first kind of trophy I took home in StarCraft 2 ever. And that after 3 years of training felt good. Even though it was just a 3rd place, it feels like that trophy now wants to have company. So it's very motivating to just look at that item, even though that item itself is somewhat meaningless. You can give it meaning by giving that item motivation towards you, to not want to have only 3rd place just all by itself in your apartment, but you want to add more stuff to it.
One of the things I noticed whenever I do like the research part of someone's career, if I'm going to do an article or an interview, usually if someone has like really jagged results, then it tends to be either that they did like something strategically which then wore off immediately, and like they weren't necessarily as good maybe as the spike suggested. But a good example would be someone like Snoot, where in terms of you can see where they've actually improved, because when I charted all of his 2012, you can almost literally see like the opponents he's beating gets better gradually, the placings he gets better gradually, and then he literally in the last tournament of the year, that's when he won the whole event. Well, the same thing, if I look at your career here, from going from the worst point up to the HomeStory Cup, which is like only like a couple of events ago, it's almost like a gradual rise, and it's got plateaus, but like you don't go below the plateau very much. So this would all suggest, unless we're way off base here, that your career is gonna you're now at the point where you could reach semi-finals in theory the next 5 tournaments. Is this where you see yourself?
I hope so. I'm not sure if I'm at semi and final level just yet, but it feels.
What would hold you back?
Well, maybe I just need a little bit more time. That's what I'm like. What I'm saying is like it doesn't necessarily mean I'm gonna be in the top 5 in the next 2 tournaments.
Yeah.
But I'm very confident I'm gonna get there, and it doesn't matter so much if it's gonna take 3 or 4 tournaments, as long as I keep just working hard towards that goal. And I think the past month I went down a little bit. I lost a little bit of motivation. There's a few things about StarCraft 2 I'm not entirely happy about that maybe affected me, but now what I used to do is when I got in that slumps, those slumps just plummeted down like a cliff, but now I catch myself much earlier. So I think if I have 1 or 2 months that I train very smart and hard, I'm gonna get there, and then nothing can stop me to take that but bad luck basically.
So we talked a lot about your game, what's improved, practicing and improving. So one of the last topics I wanted to ask you about actually was, you mentioned something interesting earlier about how you actually felt like through your experience in esports, you'd improved as a person. Because whenever I've looked into any area where there's books about how to whether it's learning martial arts or learning how to pick up girls or whatever, it looks like you're just learning that one skill, but realistically it sort of ends up becoming open-ended, and really you're just learning how to become a better person, and that will then have a knock-on effect of making you better at that one thing you're trying to do. So what have you become better as? What have you had to learn to become like a better player and a better person? What are the key things for you?
I think I have a more realistic assessment of myself as a person nowadays, which is something that really just also comes with age, I think. But also with the fact that you've been losing tournaments for like 2 years straight, so you can't really have too much, like you can't really have extremely high opinion of yourself that is higher than what's real, like what you really are. So it maybe helped me humble myself a little bit, which is good. And I've become much healthier because I was sick a lot. Like I got sick like every month for like every 2 months from traveling. And I think if you're not living healthy, traveling a lot is very hard because you're gonna get in touch with a lot of people. Like you're just bound to get sick when you're not taking care of yourself and when you go to a ton of events, because you're gonna be exposed to so much more. So being more healthy made me mentally more healthy too, because being sick all the time isn't so good on your mind either. And I think I learned to listen more to people and talk more to people and value their opinions, and having that is an extremely potent weapon in becoming better at anything, especially if you listen to people who aren't in your own field, because there's so much to be learned about StarCraft 2 from people who aren't all that good at StarCraft 2. Okay. Even one of my brothers, I have 3 brothers, one of them, like the big one, he's in Masters, but I got another one who plays StarCraft, but he's only like Platinum level, and he can teach me things about StarCraft 2 just because.
Can you give me an example?
Well, one specific example was he was watching my games a lot, and he noticed that I put my macro hatcheries in my main a lot of times, when really I should put it to my 3rd or 4th base, because if I lose that hatchery, I'm still gonna have the macro hatchery to mine. And it's pretty simple, it's just something I haven't been doing, but even though he's not as good as a player nearly as me, he can still see that because he's an intelligent human being. And there are so many people who are like in bronze or silver who are still smart. It's just because they can't execute it, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't be taking pointers from that. And even looking at my Twitch channel, like a bunch of times, like most of the times, what people are saying in the chat, I know myself, and oftentimes it's wrong. But once in a while, there's somebody who points something out that, oh yeah, I should think about that more and do that more. And just not looking at everything people say that aren't as good as you and think you're gonna know better, because there's always something you miss.
Okay, so for my final question, I always like to do a hypothetical to end these things. And so I have to try and tailor it to each person. And so the way I want to do it is like this, okay? So aliens come to Earth. The first thing they do is kill everyone in Team Liquid except you, because these aliens are just vicious, man. But not only that, I mean, yeah, exactly. They're also like very capricious though. When they kill people, they're almost like, you know, like the Romans in like the gladiator days. They like to sort of like play games with people. Okay. So what they do is they say, okay, TLO, we know you love Earth, so if you want Earth to survive, we killed all of TL, but we want to like make our own version of Team Liquid. Yeah. So you have to, for all the current members of the playing roster, you have to pick another StarCraft player who could be that player if we just renamed him and made him go on the server. Like, who is it going to be for every member of Team Liquid?
Oh, that's a hard one.
They can be from any region, but they have to match up with each player.
Like character-wise or
how they
stylistically? Yeah. Okay. This is hard.
So just go one by one and give me some names.
Yeah, okay, I've got to think a little bit about that one. Okay, let's start with... I would replace TaeJa with the STC.
The STC?
Yeah, because they are both like... When I look at them, like very happy people, they smile a lot, both of them. And I could imagine STC completely filling in that role. Like TaeJa is always pretty cheerful, even after he lost. Like he can laugh about it, and the STC would too. I would replace. I would replace Snoot with. He's actually a little bit similar to Shinro in some ways. So I would get Shinro out of the retirement.
Okay.
Put him back into that place to fill that Scandinavian spot, to have that Scandinavian demeanor there. Then okay, so there's Jos. He's okay. He's extremely talented. He was good in Pro Drawer. He's Dutch. He's a very nice guy.
I mean, they don't have to be Dutch. They could be Korean.
I know. I could replace Jos with JYP actually, maybe.
Okay. Why?
Just character-wise, he can be the Korean Jos. But I don't know. I can see it all. It's hard to explain. They're both a little bit bigger and both pretty happy people. And what else did we got? We got Hero. Hero, I would just straight out replace with Bisu.
Bisu? Yes. Okay, I'm sure he would like to know that.
You didn't say they have to agree to that.
Bisu?
Yeah, like Hero to me it's just the StarCraft 2 Bisu. So why not just take his like template basically?
Okay.
Then we got Senyo. Who would I replace Senyo with? Senyo and Jos are a little bit similar in the sense that I feel they're both playing very well but don't get the results they deserve, but I can't replace them with each other. So I would maybe look at some other guys from OGS, because I feel like there are so many of the guys who have like so much skill but never managed to like really break through. Even though like Supernova, he's been placing really well and have the results, but I feel like he's one of those people who don't have as much recognition as they should have. So I would replace Supernova with Senyo.
Okay, do you have a final message or something you want to thank or say hello to?
Because it fits so well with the theme of this Grilled, I want to thank everybody who like was cheering for me throughout all the bad periods, and hopefully you're going to be able to cheer much louder and much prouder than in the very near future when I managed to go on that big stage and take home a trophy. And also want to especially thank all the people who helped me through that period. There were a lot of people, and I want to give a big shout out to them, even though I can't name everybody here, but there was a ton of people that I didn't know and that didn't owe me anything, that just messaged me and offered their help to like overcome my RSI, to overcome my mental issues. Just people who messaged me on TL, messaged me on Skype, added me, and they have become like a really valuable part of my life, and I'm incredibly grateful because they're just great human beings. Because I basically had nothing in return to offer, and they just came to me freely and told me they want to help me, and doing that is so cool. And I hope like that I can be more like those people who just helped me without asking anything in return. Also people who helped me very directly as well. Obviously Twitch, Shiny Things, Razer, Barracuda. I think I got everything. Thanks guys for making everything possible for me. And I also realized like you have been supporting me throughout periods and I've not been doing so well through Team Liquid, and hopefully I can take more pride, can bring more pride to your friends, and thanks for supporting me even though I wasn't doing so well in the past.
Danke.
Bitteschön.